They walked in like they owned the world, laughing, snapping selfies, and waving off the waiter who tried to stop them. But what they didn't know was that the calm black man sitting quietly in the corner wasn't just another guest. He owned the entire place. When he finally stood up, silence swallowed the room. What happened next shocked everyone. Stay till the end. And don't forget to subscribe for stories that prove respect is priceless. The city never truly slept, but tonight, the lights of downtown felt alive, almost electric. From the terrace of the Elysium Lounge, the skyline shimmered like scattered diamonds, a perfect reflection of the wealth and power that passed through its doors every night. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of fine wine, truffle, and whispered secrets. Guests mingled, clinking glasses, exchanging polite smiles, and wearing their riches like armor. At the far end, separated by a velvet rope, sat the most exclusive table in the lounge. Reserved, polished, and commanding respect without even asking for it. The staff treated it like a sacred space, because it belonged to Michael Carter. Michael wasn't flashy. He didn't need the attention. But his name carried weight, even in this city where attention often equals influence. The youngest black. Billionaire in the country, he had built his empire from scratch, every brick laid with ambition, resilience, and countless sleepless nights. Tonight, though, Michael didn't want business. He wanted peace, a quiet dinner with just himself, and reflection. He entered the lounge. No entourage, no security, just a calm presence that seemed to soften the energy of the room. The staff greeted him with quiet reverence, and he returned their nods with a warm smile, shaking hands and exchanging names, a simple act that spoke volumes about who he had become. For a moment, everything felt serene, the soft jazz in the background, the muted glow of chandeliers, and the gentle hum of conversations created a bubble around his table. Then the doors swung open. In walked Ethan and Vanessa, a couple whose energy screamed entitlement. They laughed loudly, their designer shoes clicking across the marble floor like a drumbeat of arrogance. Ethan's gold chain glinted under the lights, and Vanessa's perfume preceded her, leaving a trail that seemed to announce their arrival. They ignored the hostess's polite greeting, striding past her as if the rules of the place didn't apply. Ethan smirked and pointed to Michael's reserved table. "We'll take this one," he said. The hostess hesitated. "I'm sorry, sir. That table is—" "Reserved for who?" Vanessa interrupted, a laugh escaping her lips. "We don't wait. Tables are for those who aren't worth our time." Without further ado, they crossed the velvet rope and claimed the table, laughing, snapping photos, and waving off the waiter trying to intervene. The staff froze, unsure how to handle the blatant disrespect. Michael watched quietly, leaning back in his chair, his calm eyes fixed on them. There was no anger, only an assessment, a silent measure of arrogance versus reality. He had seen behavior like this before, but tonight he chose to let them reveal themselves. Ethan poured champagne into crystal glasses, flaunting wealth that only partially matched Michael's empire. Vanessa leaned forward, speaking loudly so everyone could hear. "Finally, a table worthy of us. Whoever reserved it clearly doesn't belong here." The room went quiet. Conversations stopped mid-sentence. People's eyes darted toward the table, sensing tension, sensing an invisible line had been crossed. But Michael remained still, a picture of composure. He whispered softly to himself, "Some lessons are best learned quietly." The couple didn't know it yet, but this night would change everything. The man they thought they were belittling held power not just in wealth, but in patience, wisdom, and presence. And patience, as they were about to learn, can speak louder than arrogance ever could. Ethan and Vanessa leaned back in their chairs, glasses raised, completely oblivious to the attention they had drawn. They laughed loudly, recounting stories of luxury vacations, expensive cars, and connections that they assumed made them untouchable. Every word they spoke dripped with entitlement. Every gesture screamed superiority. The waiter approached cautiously, trying once again to enforce protocol. "Excuse me, I'm afraid this table—" Vanessa waved him off with a flick of her manicured hand. "Please don't bother us. We're very busy being important." Even the other patrons whispered among themselves, shaking their heads, some glancing toward Michael's table, sensing the storm building before it had even begun. Michael remained, seated, calm, leaning slightly back, his hands resting lightly on the table. He didn't interrupt, didn't confront. He only observed. Every laugh, every arrogant word, every careless gesture fed into a quiet calculation. He had spent years mastering patience, understanding that sometimes silence can be more powerful than confrontation. But tonight, patience wasn't just a strategy. It was a lesson, Vanessa continued, pulling out her phone to snap more photos. "This place is cute," she said, "but clearly not enough for people like us. I can't imagine someone actually working hard to own something like this. Must be nice to inherit money." Her words cut through the air, sharp and ignorant. Michael's lips pressed into a thin line. He could feel the tension radiating from other tables. He could hear the muted murmurs, the shaky clinks of cutlery, as waiters hesitated. Then Ethan, sensing an audience, decided to escalate further. "Let's make this more memorable," he said, pouring more champagne carelessly into their glasses, spilling a little onto the white tablecloth. "I mean, it's our night, right? Why worry about rules?" The room fell silent. People were watching now, some recording on their phones, others just frozen in shock. No one had seen this level of disrespect in years. Michael finally stood, slowly, deliberately, his presence commanding attention without a single word. The couple didn't recognize him at first, thinking he might be another waiter or a quiet patron. But the moment he straightened, their eyes widened. There was something in his stance, calm yet unshakable, something that spoke of authority. He didn't raise his voice, he didn't yell, he didn't need to. "I believe this table belongs to me," he said, his tone gentle but firm, carrying the weight of someone who had earned everything through struggle and determination. Ethan laughed nervously. "Oh, come on, we're just enjoying ourselves." Michael raised a single finger, stopping him mid-sentence. "You have been enjoying yourselves at the expense of respect. That ends now." Vanessa's laughter died in her throat. Ethan shifted uncomfortably, the smile slipping from his face. For the first time, they felt small. The room collectively exhaled. Other patrons leaned forward, some holding their phones mid-recording, unsure of what would happen next. Michael didn't flinch. He didn't raise his voice. He simply looked at them, the calm intensity in his eyes piercing every mask of arrogance they had worn so proudly. He waited, letting the weight of his presence fill the room. And in that silence, Ethan and Vanessa began to understand a truth they had never faced. Money, privilege, and arrogance do not equal power. Respect does. Dignity does. Patience does. By the time Michael spoke again, the lesson had begun to sink in, and the couple realized, too late, that they had underestimated not just the man but the story behind him, because some lessons are only learned when the world watches. Michael's voice, calm yet commanding, filled the room with a weight that even the most entitled could not ignore. Ethan and Vanessa's laughter had completely vanished, replaced with uneasy shifting in their seats. Other diners watched, captivated, sensing that this was no ordinary confrontation. "You see," Michael began, his tone steady, "the world often rewards those who shout the loudest, who boast the brightest, and who assume everything is theirs. But life rewards patience, effort, and respect. I am the owner of this establishment, and every brick, every chair, every shining detail you've mocked was built with hard work, long nights, and countless sacrifices." Ethan's face turned red. Vanessa's lips trembled. You own this?" Ethan stammered. The arrogance drained from his expression. Michael nodded. Yes, and I am also a reminder that no matter how high you climb on entitlement, respect is the only currency that lasts. He paused, letting his words sink in. Around the room, phones captured the moment, but more importantly, eyes absorbed the lesson. Some guests whispered in awe, others nodded, silently agreeing that this was more than a confrontation. It was a revelation. Vanessa, usually quick with a sharp retort, found herself speechless. For the first time, she felt small in a world she thought she controlled. She tried to mask it with a nervous smile, but Michael's gaze was unwavering. I didn't come here to shame you, Michael continued, softening slightly. I came to show you what arrogance looks like in the light of reality. You may not understand it now, but one day you will. And I hope you remember this moment, not for embarrassment, but as a lesson. Ethan swallowed hard, a nervous energy replacing his previous bravado. He could feel the weight of the room's attention pressing down, the judgment of strangers highlighting his own misjudgment. You see, Michael said, lowering his voice just enough to draw everyone in, success is not about showing off wealth or connections. Success is about integrity, respect, and the ability to lift others rather than step on them. That is what builds something that lasts. Vanessa's eyes welled with tears, not out of fear but realization. For the first time, she glimpsed a world beyond the shallow measures of her life. She understood, even if only partially, that entitlement would never bring her true fulfillment. Michael walked slowly toward the exit, leaving Ethan and Vanessa frozen at their table. The room remained hushed, the lesson lingering like an invisible presence. Guests returned to their meals, but the air had changed. People were reflecting, silently thanking Michael for showing what dignity looked like in action. Before leaving, Michael paused, glanced back, and added softly, Remember, life rewards humility, effort, and compassion far more than arrogance ever could, and with that, he was gone. The couple sat in stunned silence, their previous bravado shattered. They had laughed, flaunted, and assumed power, but for the first time, they realized how hollow it had been. Outside, the night continued as usual, but inside that room, a lesson had been etched into the hearts of everyone present. Not through anger, not through confrontation, but through a quiet, powerful presence that reminded the world that true success is invisible to arrogance. Ethan and Vanessa finally left. Heads bowed, a little wiser, a little humbled. The lesson lingered, not as punishment, but as inspiration, a reminder that every person they meet has a story, a struggle, and a strength that cannot be measured by appearances alone. And sometimes, the most important lessons come quietly, yet leave a mark forever. Days passed since that unforgettable evening, but the memory of Michael's quiet authority refused to fade. Ethan and Vanessa couldn't escape the echo of his words, the weight of his presence, and the undeniable truth that humility and effort outweighed arrogance. Ethan sat alone in his apartment, staring at his reflection in the darkened window. He had always measured success in applause, attention, and social approval, but now he felt the emptiness beneath it all. The laughter he had shared with Vanessa that night felt hollow, replaced by a gnawing sense of regret. Why did I think disrespect was power? He whispered to himself. The words were barely audible, yet they carried the first spark of self-awareness, a small crack in the armor of entitlement he had worn so long. Meanwhile, Vanessa wandered the streets, lost in thought. She saw people hustling, struggling, and working tirelessly, and for the first time, she recognized the dignity in that effort. Her privileged bubble felt fragile, and she realized how much she had taken for granted. She wanted to apologize, to change, but she wasn't sure how. It was in that silent reflection that the true turning point began. Both of them realized that external wealth and validation could never replace inner growth. They needed a change, not for show, but for themselves. Ethan decided to start small. He volunteered at a local shelter where he saw children and families fighting battles he had never imagined. He learned that the world was bigger than his ego, that compassion could create impact far beyond material gain. Vanessa joined him, initially reluctant, but slowly. She discovered a satisfaction she had never felt in glamorous parties or social media posts. Helping others, listening to stories of struggle and resilience, made her heart expand in ways she had never thought possible. Michael's words haunted them, guiding their transformation. Success is about integrity, respect, and the ability to lift others rather than step on them. They began to understand that humility was not weakness, it was strength, often invisible but profoundly powerful. Over weeks, Ethan and Vanessa became known not for arrogance, but for genuine kindness. Neighbors noticed the change. Friends marveled at their sincerity. The couple who had once mocked life's lessons were now embracing them, quietly making a difference in ways that would ripple far beyond themselves. One evening, as they volunteered at a local youth program, Ethan whispered to Vanessa, "Do you think he knew we'd end up here?" She smiled, a tear glistening in her eye. "I think he knew we needed a nudge, and we finally listened." The turning point wasn't dramatic with fanfare or applause. It was subtle, personal, and deeply transformative. The true power of Michael's lesson lay not in fear or shame, but in the realization that change is always possible, and that the first step begins with self-reflection. Their journey wasn't perfect. Mistakes still happened, moments of doubt crept in, and the temptation to return to old habits lingered. But they had discovered something far more valuable, the courage to confront themselves, to grow, and to act with purpose. As they walked home that night, hands intertwined, Ethan said softly, "I feel like I finally see the world clearly." Vanessa nodded. "And I feel like we finally see ourselves." In that clarity, the seeds of inspiration were planted, not just for them, but for anyone who witnessed their transformation. The story of arrogance turned into humility, privilege turned into service, and ego turned into empathy was now unfolding before their eyes. And the best part? The journey was only beginning. Just as Ethan and Vanessa began to embrace their new path, life decided to test them in ways they hadn't anticipated. Transformation, they were learning, was never a straight road. It came with obstacles that demanded courage, patience, and resilience. It started subtly. Their friends, who had once admired their flashy lifestyle, began to distance themselves. Invitations to parties dwindled, and social media interactions that once fueled their egos now felt like hollow echoes of the past. The world they had known seemed to mock their choices, whispering doubts. Was this really worth it? Did you lose everything for nothing? Ethan felt the pull of old habits. One evening, while counting the coins he had earned volunteering at a community event, he thought of the luxurious nights he had left behind. "Maybe I've gone too far," he murmured. "Maybe I'm giving up more than I can handle." Vanessa noticed his hesitation and took his hand. "Change isn't easy," she said gently. "Remember why we started. Remember the lesson he taught us." Her words were soft but firm, a reminder that every challenge was an opportunity to prove that their growth was real. The real test came unexpectedly. A local charity project they had dedicated months to run into a crisis. Funds were mismanaged, volunteers quit, and the children who relied on their program were left disappointed. Panic and fear threatened to undo all the progress they had made. Ethan and Vanessa felt the weight of responsibility pressing down on them. For the first time, they questioned their own abilities. Could they truly make a difference? Or had they been chasing an illusion of redemption? It was in that moment of doubt that Michael appeared, not literally, but in memory. His calm, authoritative presence returned in Ethan's mind, along with the words that had changed their lives. Success is about integrity, respect, and lifting others. Those words became their anchor. Instead of giving up, Ethan and Vanessa doubled down. They reached out to local businesses, rallied community support, and personally mentored the volunteers who remained. Long nights turned into early mornings, frustration turned into determination, and setbacks became lessons rather than defeats. Through their struggle, they discovered a profound truth. Real change is forged in the fires of adversity. It isn't measured by applause or recognition, but by perseverance and commitment to a purpose greater than oneself. By the end of the month, the program was back on track. Children laughed in the playground once more. Volunteers returned with renewed energy, and the local community began to notice the couple who had transformed their lives not through wealth or status, but through dedication, compassion, and humility. Ethan looked at Vanessa one evening, exhausted but fulfilled. "We almost gave up," he admitted. "I almost went back to who I was." Vanessa squeezed his hand, smiling through her fatigue. "But we didn't, and now we know that even when life tests us, we can rise stronger than before. In facing the challenge, they had discovered that inspiration wasn't just about uplifting words, it was about action, courage, and consistency. Their story was no longer a tale of mistakes and privilege, but a living example of resilience and transformation. The world outside might not have applauded them, but they had gained something far more valuable, the knowledge that change, no matter how difficult, is always possible when you refuse to give up. And as they looked at the faces of the children in their program, filled with hope and trust, they knew that their journey had just begun and that every challenge ahead would be another chance to grow, inspire, and make a difference. Years had passed since Ethan and Vanessa first walked into that crossroads of life, unsure and conflicted. They had faced temptation, ridicule, loss, and uncertainty. Yet each obstacle had shaped them into individuals they barely recognized, but in the best possible way. The neighborhood that once judged them now looked to them for guidance. Their program for children had grown beyond what they had imagined. A library, mentorship workshops, and art programs had been added, all run with the same principles that had changed their own lives: integrity, dedication, and compassion. Ethan watched as a young boy, timid and hesitant, approached the center. I don't think I'm good at anything," the boy admitted quietly. Ethan knelt to meet his gaze. "You're good at being you," he said softly, "and that's more than enough. Let me show you what's possible when you believe in yourself." Vanessa, meanwhile, oversaw the community art program. She saw children who reminded her of herself, confused, insecure, searching for approval. With patience, encouragement, and unwavering belief, she guided them to express themselves, to find their voices, and to recognize their own worth. One evening, after a long day filled with laughter, minor frustrations, and small victories, Ethan and Vanessa sat on the steps outside the center. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold, as if the world itself were honoring their journey. "We've come so far," Vanessa said, leaning her head on Ethan's shoulder. "Do you remember the people we were before all of this?" Ethan chuckled, thinking of the arrogance, the ignorance, the careless pursuit of status and attention. "I hardly recognize them anymore," he admitted. "But I'm grateful. Grateful for every mistake, every setback, every uncomfortable moment that led us here." Their story had become one of ripple effects. Former classmates who had once mocked them reached out, inspired to make changes in their own lives. Parents of children in the program expressed gratitude that went beyond words. Even strangers, hearing their story through community talks and online videos, found courage to face their own struggles. Ethan realized something profound. Legacy wasn't about leaving money or possessions behind. It was about leaving an imprint on the hearts and minds of others. Every act of kindness, every lesson taught, every life touched, it all mattered far more than they had ever imagined. Vanessa smiled at a young girl painting beside them, a spark of confidence lighting up her face. "This," she whispered, "is what it's all about." In that moment, Ethan and Vanessa understood the ultimate truth. The most meaningful victories are the ones you share, the ones that inspire others to rise, and the courage to continue despite fear. Their journey wasn't about fame or fortune. It was about love, purpose, and resilience. And as the center's lights glowed warmly against the encroaching night, Ethan looked toward the horizon and whispered, "We've started something that will outlive us, something that can keep changing lives for generations." Vanessa nodded, eyes shining with unshed tears. "It all started with a choice," she said softly. "The choice to rise, to fight, and to believe." Their journey, once uncertain and fraught with mistakes, had transformed into a living legacy. It was a story of redemption, courage, and the unyielding power of the human spirit. A reminder that no matter where you begin, with determination and heart, you can leave the world better than you found it. And for anyone watching, reading or listening to their story, the choice to change your life, to inspire and to make a difference is always in your hands. Start today, and your own legacy awaits. If this story touched your heart, imagine the difference you can make in your own life and in the lives of others. Don't wait for tomorrow. Start today. Hit that subscribe button, like, and share this video, and be part of a journey that inspires change and leaves a legacy.